Hi, Olivier.
Hi.
How are you today? I've just had a great half an hour speaking in French with you.
I'm still good.
You're good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Interesting subject today, debunking pseudoscience. We've all gone through COVID not so long ago. We've seen all the dangers that are out there, and it was great. It was great having the conversation with you in French. I learned to get to know you better, which is natural. It's the first time that we're talking for long, but it was super interesting to hear. Um, all that you have learned through the years about this question of pseudoscience, how to tackle it, and I'm super eager to do the same now in English here with you for our English speaking audience.
Sure.
So I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. We are live. Things the live is going well. So I am going to pause for a for second or two. Present you, share your bio with people, and then we'll start from there. Welcome to this new episode of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. Today, I'm over the moon happy to have with me Olivier Bernard. Olivier is a pharmacist and fellow of the Ordre des Pharmaciens du Québec and has a master's degree in molecular genetics. You may know him as Le Pharmachien, the name of his TV series, book series, and website. Olivier worked for a few years in the pharmaceutical industry, but his fascination and exasperation with scientific and medical myths led him to become a popularizer whose number one enemy is pseudoscience. Since 2012, he has been creating cartoons, writing books, producing and hosting the TV series Les Aventures du Pharmachien, and more recently, the podcast Dérives, where he tries to understand how beliefs lead people to tragic fates in their quest for spirituality, health, or personal growth. So, where does pseudoscience come from? Why does it have such appeal? How do we dismantle it? These are some of the subjects we're going to be talking about today with Olivier. Olivier, welcome to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. Super happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Olivier, uh, for people who just heard your bio, can you talk just a little bit more, a couple of a minute or two about how you came to start a career as a pharmacist
Mhm.
and then go into a master's in molecular genetics, but all throughout this professional journey, including communication and popularization and debunking pseudoscience. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I always kind of knew that I would go in the scientific field, probably healthcare. I kind of liked chemistry and also biology and human health, but how the human body works. So I knew I would do something regarding these kind of topics. So I went into pharmacy, like just I like this. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just put pharmacy on my application form for college. I liked it, but at the end of my bachelor's degree, I knew I didn't want to be only a pharmacist.
Mhm.
So when I graduated in 2004, I wanted to try different things. So I did a couple of years in a research lab. Then I went to work in the pharmaceutical industry. So I tried different things, and then at the end of the day, I felt like I had this need or this urge to try to reach more people, to try to communicate some things regarding scientific myths or preconceptions or beliefs. And I tried to just build a website and social medias, which were pretty new at the time.
Mhm.
And from 2012, it just started from there.
Mhm. And a question that I have even from our conversation before, is there I'm thinking of the origin story, of all that you did. I- Did pseudoscience, did false beliefs have somehow an impact on you or on someone around you while growing up? Why this passion for this particular subject?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't remember, like, some. I meet science communicators who also are very interested and involved in pseudoscience, debunking worldwide, and pretty often they have a personal story. Like
Hmm.
either they were themselves, like I've met like people who were naturopaths in
Oh
another
wow.
career, or people who've had someone close to them that had cancer and didn't want to get treatment, or
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't have any of that, to be honest. But I think I was always fascinated by weird things, and I was the kid who I read magazines about UFOs, and
Okay.
the pyramids were built by aliens, and I think I liked that kind of stuff myself when I was young. But I was asking a lot of questions and maybe not getting the answers, so I think I was always fascinated by that. And when I
Hmm.
entered the medical field and I realized, well, you know what? Some people believe stuff that is not true. Like we know for a fact it's not accurate, and
Hmm.
it causes them harm.
Yeah.
It kind of clicked at that point. Like as a pharmacist, when I saw people who were like they had actual measurable harm from their beliefs,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's when it started becoming more a concern and a passion
Hmm.
for me.
Well, this kind of fast forwards our conversation to what you did on Dérives, which is the series about people, looking for things like ayahuasca to,
Hmm.
and then having some of them dying eventually. And this is kind of the extreme of what you just said.
Yeah.
Although it's not medical, it's something different. But still, these people are looking for something that is going to bring him to another, I don't know, spiritual level,
Hmm.
or to maybe heal something they have inside emotionally, and they end up falling into this culture
Hmm.
where there's, it's kind of, you were talking about UFOs, it's all kind of paranormal to a
Hmm.
certain there's a gray area between spirituality and the and what you describe in the show.
Yes.
But I think that's exactly the extreme of what you just said. It's not taking a treatment for cancer, it's actually taking something that ends up leading to your death,
Hmm.
because you believe somehow you started believing in a myth, or in a rhetoric about, I don't know, a treatment, a practice, uh, and that's where I think it gets difficult. So in your experience, all this is reading these things about UFOs, pyramids, etc., um, exploring and doing this investigative, reporting, and creating this podcast around this specific theme. You had to travel, you had to go talk to people. Do you have any personal, kind of conclusion, not conclusion is not the right term, but personal idea that's forming in your head of what a belief is, and how, why do people hang on to them?
Yeah.
uh, because they hang on to them really hard. We can talk about later about how to make people depart from false beliefs, but it's really difficult, right?
Yes. It's something I'm thinking about myself all the time. And in my investigative series, Dérives, the first season was about a woman who went into a sweat lodge,
Yes.
and she died because it was an extreme sweating session, and she died after many hours being in an extreme sweat experiment. The second season is about a young man who was taking more and more, hallucinogens and psychedelics, and ended up, maybe or not, maybe harming himself because of that. Uh, and now I'm working on a new season now, which is also about someone who went, like head first into this kind of tendency or this
Hmm.
kind of trend, and it ended up killing him. And the more I do these kind of stories, and the more I realize they have a lot in common.
Hmm.
All of these people, they start by just they want to change something about their life. They kind of want something better. They want to improve their well-being, they want to improve just feeling good, it just
Hmm.
starts with that. It also sometimes it can be uh, it's some people want to kind of build a new life for themselves. Like the woman who was in a sweat lodge, she wanted to do that kind of stuff herself, like being a mentor or being
Okay.
organizing these events. The young man who took ayahuasca, it's the same thing. He wanted to do kind of a
Become a shaman,
facilitator.
a facilitator. Mhm.
So I think that these people, what they want is what we all want. Basically, just we want to have good lives, fulfilling lives, and it's a legitimate need, of
Mhm.
course. Now, there are some things in life that can, if you go into the extremes of it, it can be harmful, it can be dangerous to yourself. Now, it's true for many things. Like I had one specialist give me the example of, mountaineers. They climb Everest and they lose fingers, and
Yeah.
they're like, I don't care. Like for me, climbing these mountains is more important than my fingers.
Wow.
It's hard to understand, but now I guess it's okay. I mean, if they're okay with that,
Mhm.
but a lot of people go into these things, like especially healthcare related things or spiritual things that kind of, you said it, like sometimes spirituality blends with science like statements, like you're going to purify yourself, both your mind and your body and all that. Sometimes they just don't know it's going to be harmful for them, and that,
Mhm.
I think that's the main, that was the common theme among all of these. It's, just people doing something that they think is only good, and they just disregard all the potential risks. And this is often inside a culture where the risks are very much like, you're not encouraged to look at the risk, but only what's good about that. And that,
Mhm.
I think that's one of the things that's the most dangerous, when it's all good and it's never harmful. It should be a red flag for sure.
Mhm. So it feels to me like, um, from what you're saying, people have this idea of the ideal world, or just an idea of how the world works that they
Hmm.
feel comfortable with.
Hmm.
And sometimes they can be in a situation where they feel uncomfortable. Something is not working, they don't feel fulfilled, and so
Hmm.
they hang on to these beliefs, and in the idea of, if I get there, everything is going to be fine. And we kind of all of do that in a way.
Of course.
Why do we work? Why do we build things? Why do we have projects? Because we want to be fulfilled. But in the case of especially of these of Dérives, this is quite extreme. But let's say something, maybe something more, very much smaller and with lesser effect. Flat Earth, flat earthers. They hang
Hmm.
on to that idea of flat Earth very strongly,
Hmm.
because somehow, I guess, life makes more sense to them like that. But
Hmm.
then if we can move a little bit and say, okay, climate change, it's different. There's people who are on the spectrum of being anxious about,
Hmm.
eco anxious, and actually stress, and actually having mental health issues to do with this, with seeing the world change at a rate that's uncomfortable to them, and that we can see day by day. But then there's people who are just skeptical about it, and I guess for them it's the same thing. Their view of the world, and hanging on to that idea, makes them more comfortable waking up every day and um, saying, this is how I see the world, and don't change my mind. So I guess your role as someone who wants to debunk pseudoscience and false beliefs is quite difficult, because there's a lot of
Hmm.
emotion in all of these things. Now, you mentioned in another conversation before that sometimes humor is a way to diffuse that and to be able to start a conversation. Is that something? I know it's something that you've used in the past, but I imagine there's good practices on how and when to use it, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, I right from the start when I started doing cartoons online and videos and in 2012, right from the start there was a lot of humor into it, and I think that's actually I kind what I did was working because of that. It was generating a lot of interest. It's pretty rare to hear like healthcare professionals making jokes and all that.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit more frequent now, but at the time it was completely unheard of. So I guess it worked very well. Now I think humor can be a double-edged sword. And what I mean by that is that when I started, I was just, yeah, I was like making jokes about a lot of things, not thinking about, yeah, but for some people it's going to be like some people are not going to like the fact that I'm maybe laughing a bit about that, like
Mhm.
detoxing the beliefs behind that are pretty absurd when you look at it. Like for someone who's in the scientific field, you just read about detox, it just makes so much, it's so much nonsense that you can only laugh about it in a way.
Mhm.
Now, if you want to just laugh about it, that's fine. You're going to reach quite a few people. But there are some people that you might want to reach that they're not going to respond very well to that, because
Mhm.
if they watch you just making jokes about that, maybe they'll think you're not credible. Maybe they'll think that you're not taking this seriously, that you haven't really thought about that.
Mhm.
And those who actually promote pseudoscience in general, they're usually, well, usually it's hard to say, but a lot of people who are big promoters of pseudoscience, I think they're genuine. I think they're people who really genuinely believe that what
Mhm.
they say is true, and they're being very serious. So if you're, I think humor is a very good vehicle to explain things, to make it, more digestible. So it's funnier. You learn better when it's fun, when it's,
Mhm.
but again, for me was, I, over the 10 years or so I've been doing this, I've toned down the humor and now I use it in very specific moments and not all the time, because again, my goal is not to talk to a bunch of people who are already convinced of what I have
Mhm.
to say. If I was doing that, that would have no purpose.
Of
What I
course.
want is to reach people who need to hear this stuff, and then
Mhm.
sometimes for these people to listen to you, humor is not the good vehicle. So I
Mhm.
think you need to stay flexible with that. And in my podcast Dérives, there's no humor. It's
No,
very
not at all.
serious,
It is.
because I thought that was, in that case, it was not the way to go.
It's funny. I just had a conversation a few episodes ago with Vicky Pedno or Biolovic, and she talked about the concept of punching down. You never want to punch down, and it feels like if you're
I agree.
scientific and making fun of someone who believes something, you're punching down, and so this person will feel insulted by you and will never engage with you in conversation. So it makes total sense what you're saying. Um, so this makes me feel that humor can be a conversation starter, never punching down, always to just diffuse attention in the air. But
Mhm.
then you need to have empathy for the people and some seriousness in your discourse. That's what I'm getting from what you're saying.
Absolutely. And even me, like right from the start, I had this kind of mantra that I was telling myself pretty often is, you can laugh about ideas, but never about people.
Yeah.
And I still believe in that. I still think it's true. Like there are some ideas and concepts, like you mentioned flat earth before. I mean, we can laugh about flat earth.
Hmm, hmm.
Now laughing about flat earthers, or people who believe in that, that might not be very productive.
Of course.
But finding the idea funny, of course it's funny. Okay.
Hmm, hmm.
So I think that you can like, if you go into that, it's fine. But then sometimes it kind of just, it's hard to say, because sometimes I created content where I was convinced that I was really really not offending anyone, but just only making jokes about ideas. And there are some people that would still find it offensive.
Hmm,
So at the end of the day, you need to find some kind of balance. You
hmm.
cannot produce content that's going to please everyone, that's for sure. That's
It's true.
impossible. if that's your objective, that you say like 100% will read that and like it, that's not going to happen. Sorry about that.
Mhm.
So for me, it's more about, finding balance, thinking about what's the best way to reach as many people as I can. And my personal objective in the last few years has been, I'm trying to reach people who are, I call them on the fence. People who are not sure what they should think about this or this. Like this new vaccine, is it okay? I'm not sure. I'm kind of not against it, but I'm kind of worried. Or for me, that's these people, they're the most important of all.
Mhm,
Those
mhm.
who are convinced that what is scientific is good. I don't need to spend time
No
on
need to
those.
preach to them, of course.
No, and those who are anti-science, or they want to have nothing to do with this or this, I can't do anything for them either.
Yeah,
So people on the fence, and
yeah.
these people, you need to have good balance in how you communicate. Uh, yeah, for sure.
Of course, of course. No, this makes total sense. And I've heard. I don't remember the name of the podcast now. It might have been This American Life. There's a guy, an African American who's a jazz person, and it's his whole story on how he got people from the KKK to leave the KKK, but
Hmm.
not by convincing them, but
Hmm.
they liked jazz, so they were there, so they had some kind of admiration for him as a musician, and
Hmm.
that it was, and then there was a long process of becoming friends and of the person realizing it. It always, for the people who are way back in the skeptical side of things, it needs to be an internal path of they need to decide to jump on the other side of the fence themselves. It's too hard of a fight for one person, for you, for me, to change someone's opinion, I think.
Yeah. And we've all been there. I mean, I don't know about you, but me, when I started doing this, I was really going like, I'm going to change people's minds, and that's cool. I mean, it's great to have this kind of uh I don't know, it's kind of optimism in a way. But nowadays, I don't think like that, and I relate to what you just said so much. Like now, what I want to do is like maybe add some more perspective.
Mhm, mhm,
Like,
mhm,
hey, you believe that thing. I get that. I get why you think that's maybe true, or I get why you're upset or worried about that. I get that, and also part of what you're saying is true. Now, I might have some little more information that I would like to share with you if you want.
mhm,
That's
mhm,
really how I approach every topic now,
mhm.
and it works better.
Yeah, yeah. Because somehow, I guess, the way you're crafting what you do, you get people to get to go towards you, and then that's
Hmm.
half of the fight is won just there. Because if you
Hmm.
go into someone's face and say, here, I have something to tell you, and I'm
Yeah.
going to change that, then you lost. But if you're like kind of just enticing and say, hey, I'd love to hear your what you have to say. Actually, I may bring one or two variables to
Hmm.
your idea, and then the people come. That's half the battle won, I think. And I think it's a great work, just doing, because it's an effort, I'm sure, to craft things like that.
Well, I agree so much. And you know what? Like, even as a pharmacist and as healthcare professionals, there's a lot of, we talk a lot about that, like, for many years now. A lot of our work is relationship building.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
Like,
mhm, mhm.
if you build a relationship with your patients, with the people who come to see you to have advice, if they see you as someone who's trustworthy, as someone who can listen, who can make an effort to get your point of view, I mean, that's where you can have a real impact.
Mhm, mhm.
It's not just saying like do this and go home and like just obey. That doesn't work. Just doesn't work, and we see it. I mean, I see it at the pharmacy. I see it at the clinic. It's just, if you just tell people do this, they eventually they won't do it. But if you build a relationship and they see that you're someone who they can trust, then at the end of the day, you're going to have maybe an impact or an influence on that person's life. I think science communication is very much the same thing.
No, no, I totally agree. And you had mentioned, and you didn't use the word this time, but in our conversation in French, and I had really found it interesting that pharmacists, especially those who are in contact with the public, of course, are
Hmm.
influencers in a certain
Yeah.
way, and I think it makes total sense with what you just said.
Yeah.
Now, bringing the conversation back to the usual, the audience of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, I
Hmm.
know a lot of these young researchers, be it in the PhD, recently graduated or early career researchers who want to embark in science communication. I see them taking part in events and trying to learn something about science communication,
Hmm.
and I know that depending on what they work on, they may be afraid of putting themselves out there, especially
Hmm.
social media today. There's trolling. There's
Hmm.
so much negative that can come from the way the platforms are created. But I really wonder whether you have a word of inspiration for someone who now has this kind of mission that they want to embark on, to debunk something, or at least to change some minds about something that's very important to them scientifically. And the feeling I get is that when you come straight out of academia, you are all about data,
Hmm.
and I feel that data dumping is an error, or is, it's not the right way to go. Do you have yeah, a word of inspiration and of maybe some advice
Hmm.
for these young communicators on how to start having productive conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Like, it's almost been like 11 years now that I'm doing, content, like either online or doing TV shows and, podcasts and stuff on the radio and all. And I'm constantly looking for young researchers who are just interested and they just have a passion for what they do, and that they could maybe communicate this to an audience, and usually younger audiences. Like, I'm really interested in, people 40 and below and all that. And uh you know i I contact constantly, like even this morning before we talked, I was
Mhm.
writing to researchers for a new project I'm working on.
Okay.
And most of the times they what I see usually is sometimes they don't feel like maybe confident enough. Like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
not sure I can do that. Well, if you don't get the experience, you're never going to get good. Like,
That's
I
true.
didn't get good talking on TV, like, right, just like that, like, it's just
Overnight, yeah.
something. Yeah, it's just experience building. So that's the first thing. Being afraid of backlash, I think we spend too much time worrying about that. Like, I can say with with pretty much good confidence that I've been one of the healthcare professionals who had the most hate in the province of Quebec in the last few years. I got a lot of
Mm.
it, and it's not so bad. Like, to be honest, it's not. It's really, we should not focus about that. Really,
Mhm.
it's just most of the time people are so happy. They're so glad. I see it on just in the comments of podcasts with researchers. Like, people are so happy to, like, wow, it's so nice to hear someone with this kind of expertise talk about what they do. Now, the best advice I can give is try to find ways to make it, like, engaging and just easy to understand. That's for me, it's the biggest barrier I see with researchers is they're used to present in scientific meetings and that kind of stuff, and you need to completely have another way of communicating. Really,
Mhm.
just talk to, explain things like you would try to explain it to a bunch of kids at a pool party. Like, there's
Mm.
a bunch of kids who ask you, like, what do you do? And you're like, well, I'm a researcher in molecular genetics. All right, now explain it like you would explain to them. And sometimes when I say that, people are like, yeah, but talking like to kids, it's not, I don't want to be patronizing and all. No, it's not patronizing, because, like me, when I want to learn new stuff, that's how I want it.
Mhm.
I want to start the 5-year-old explanation. So make it a lot easier, and that than you think is necessary. Start from there, and
Yeah.
then just leave yourself the room to adjust along the way.
Simplify. So I guess shed a lot of the data and focus on like one or two key points for.
Couple of key points. What's practical? Like
Mhm,
people don't want to know about the theory. So what's practical? What's in it for them? And also just using normal vocabulary, no complicated words and all that.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, that's. I mean, start from there. I'm not saying it's all that,
Of
but
course.
start from there.
Yeah. Now that's a great starting point. And that's I just got a just had this idea come up of something that is often mentioned by young researchers or PhD students, which is that the question of that family dinner where someone is, I don't know, doesn't believe in climate change,
Mm,
and having these difficult conversations
mhm,
about vaccines during COVID. For us
yeah.
who have studied in this domain of the life sciences, it's super easy to grasp those,
Mm,
those data, those mechanisms, those techniques, etc., those technologies, but it's not for other people.
mhm,
And one of the things that you mentioned before is you need to accept that it's not easy for other people to understand and to accept, to be able to talk with them. But going back to this question of, which is particular of, there's someone in your family with whom there's often this kind of bickering of the skeptic person versus you, and or even it reveals itself in other ways of, but what are you doing research anyway? Well, get a real job. That's another one that often happens. But if we go back to pseudoscience with someone
mhm.
that's close, is it something that's happened to you that you've had to tackle? Is it something that you have advice on how to tackle for young researchers out there?
Oh yeah, I mean it happens to all of us who are in the medical or scientific field. Like you're at this party or this dinner, and someone comes up with this kind of belief or idea regarding that's kind of related to what you do, and you know it's completely inaccurate. And it's a struggle. Like myself, I've struggled a lot with that. um Even my girlfriend was a big help for me because she was telling me how I did in my interventions.
Okay.
And early on, the results were not that good. Like
Mm.
uh because sometimes you get angry.
Yeah.
When someone's like vaccines or poison, and you work in immunology, it's kind of
Hey,
tough
hey,
to hear.
of course.
It's a tough pill to swallow to hear that. The first thing you want to say is, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay. And you can do that and never talk to that person again. And maybe
Yeah.
that's okay. Maybe that's fine. But sometimes, especially in families or in circles of friends, you can't do that. There's some people you need to kind of still engage
Yeah.
and find some kind of common ground. And that's my personal strategy: is what can we agree on, or at least how can I show this person that I'm not the antagonist here? And
Hmm.
that's really hard. Like even for me, it's really difficult. So the strategy more specifically that I use is some things I alluded to earlier. I have this approach in 4 steps. The first step is listening to the person, because if you immediately just say no, that's false because of, no, that's, you're not in a conversation. So
Hmm.
someone says something that is not really accurate, so first listen and ask a couple of questions, like, why do you think that? Why do you think that this is the right worldview by opposition to what other people say? Where did you read about that, etc.? That's the first step. Second step, give empathy. So basically saying to the person, well, I can see that it kind of worries you, or you're kind of concerned about that, and I can totally get that. I mean, I think it's a good thing to maybe be a bit cautious regarding these things, or
Hmm.
so just validate the person in their feelings or whatever. Then find something that you can both maybe agree on. Like, well, regarding vaccines, well, of course, there are some vaccines that have been like not so good in the past. It's true, or maybe their transparency regarding prices are not very. Find something you can agree on. If you do these 3 things, just these 3 things, well, at that point, you won't be in a position to one another.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
because the person will have seen, well, this person is listening to me, is asking me questions to better understand what I think, is giving me some kind of validation, and also he says that what I'm saying is not completely false. So, and now once you've done that, if you see an opening, then ask the person, hey, I maybe I have another way of looking at things I would like to propose to you, if you're interested.
Okay, if you're
If the per-
interested, yeah.
Yeah, if the person says no, you're like, okay, no problem, man, just forget about that. But if the person says, well, yeah, go ahead, uh well, the person might be much more open at that
Of
point
course.
to just give it a thought.
Hmm. Hmm.
And just also forget the idea of just convincing the person, like, just just try to add more perspective, maybe another perspective, and the person will, I mean, you just plant a seed and maybe it will
Yeah.
grow later. That's not up to you.
I love it, and it's a great way to end our conversation, because now looking back at this half hour that we spent together, the thing, if I try to summarize it in one image, if you want to deal with pseudoscience, or with a false belief in someone that you feel that, based on your knowledge, that it's deleterious or potentially deleterious to someone, well, no one likes to be preached at, so don't get on your
Mm,
soapbox and preach. That's the first no. Don't do that. And I kind of want to bring this new concept of the empathic influencer. I feel that if you can put yourself in a position to first be empathic, because you really kind of show the stepwise way to go. First listen, then be empathic, then show that you were listening by kind of retelling the points that you think make sense. And then if there is an opening, so there's a lot of empathy in this process of your
mhm,
saying, and a lot of patience on your side. So you need to kind of inspire by example, and never by preaching. And I feel this kind of, in a nutshell, resumes what I feel your message is and your experience has been, or at least where you're at today, in your experience.
mm.
And the other important thing from what you said, and it's can be stressful for people because of feelings of imposter feelings, is when you're invited to do something, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have the credentials, but the person or the organization thought of you. Respect that this organization, these people somehow looked
Mhm,
at your profile, or read something you wrote and said, you know what, Olivier, David, whoever, should be the one. We'll invite them for this experiment, for this event, for this uh, content creation, I don't know, platform, whatever.
mhm.
Accept it, and it's it's it can be difficult because of imposter feelings, of course. But from what I get, Olivier, you have accepted things before having credentials, or official credentials, or experience, many times throughout your career, and it just helped you to grow professionally. So I think that's the other key take home for me today.
I still don't have credentials, so I mean,
Yeah. Well, now you do have the
but
experience.
no, but it's a very good point. Like, there's a lot of perceived hierarchy sometimes in
Hmm.
academia,
Hmm.
and I think there's a reason for that. But again, I've met some young researchers that they were just amazing to explain things, and of course they didn't have the whole baggage of experience of their elders and people who have been in the field for 35 years. Of course they don't have that, but
Hmm.
maybe sometimes you have something else. Maybe you relate or you connect better with younger generations who need to be talked in another way, or maybe you can bring up examples from things that are more modern, from, I don't know, like
Yeah.
actual trends on social networks, maybe pop culture references, whatever, like, don't feel like you're not good enough. Start from somewhere inside of your field of expertise, of course. Okay, I'm
Hmm.
not saying just say yes to everything, that would be a mistake. But if you feel like, yeah, it is within my expertise, then just go for it. And sometimes I've done bad interviews in the past, and it happens, and it's
Hmm.
okay, you just learn from that.
That's it. It's all a learning process, and yeah, if someone is giving you an opportunity to try something new, trust that there's a reason why they invited you and why they thought of you.
Yeah, and maybe offer yourself. Like I get that sometimes. People write to me and they're like, if you ever need someone in clinical neuropsychology
Okay,
research, then I'm here for you. And I have a Word document where I keep all the names of those people, and I do contact them when I get to
awesome,
their topic. So
awesome.
offer yourselves.
Awesome. Actually, this is a great way also to really end our conversation. If someone that's listening wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah. Okay. To reach out to me, what's the best way? That's a good question.
I'm running here. If you see here below your
Yeah.
website, your
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Twitter. So on Facebook, Le Pharmachien, on Twitter at Le Pharmachien,
Yeah.
and you have lepharmacien.com, which I know see has a little error there. But is that
Yeah.
so? If someone does want to offer to help you in your projects, is Twitter a good way to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I almost never tweet. I tweet like twice a year. So that's the best way to reach me, and I'm actually not joking. So if you send me a message on
A DM.
Twitter,
Okay.
a DM, for sure I'm going to get it in my email inbox and I'm going to respond to you. So let's go for that.
Awesome. Olivier, this was great. I learned a lot. I think there's a lot of inspiring nuggets of knowledge in what you shared today. And thanks again for your time and for accepting to come on Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for the invitation. That was really cool and fun and interesting.
Awesome. Well, for you who are watching, thank you for watching and hearing what Olivier had to share. We'll be here another Friday for another live recording. Thanks so much for being a fan of the show, and see you around.